Hi, this is Michelle Taylor, and we're talking today about dealing with difficult people. I have to say, this is the hardest training that I've ever had to prep for. And why this is the hardest training is because the research around this is not clear, and sometimes there's a lot of conflict around what the so-called experts and research is saying. So when there's conflict, I'll let you know, but let's move forward. But I think it's just showing you how difficult it is to know what the right thing to do is here. And if you're having troubles, just rest assured that even the experts don't know. Okay, so to start with, what we're going to look at is getting out of the drama triangle. You'll remember that from the work that we've done before, and I'll give you a little bit of a refresher. We're going to look at the types of difficult personalities in nursing. We're going to be deciding who you're dealing with by being objective. We're going to be looking closely at chronic complaining behaviour and going back to the drama triangle. They're called the villains, or being in persecutor mode. And we're going to be looking at some ideas of what to do. So the drama triangle, one of my favorites. So you'll remember that from the video, drama triangle versus presence. And I've got the link there if you want to refresh yourself. So this image that I've got doesn't use the exact words. So if you recollect, the persecutor was the villain, and that's the one that blames. And the rescuer was the hero, and that's the one that saves the day. So you can probably see that anyone's a chronic complainer or has an issue, they dance around this drama triangle. Sometimes they're finger pointing, and sometimes they're the ones who save the day, and they think that they've got all the knowledge in the department. And some actually a victim. They're saying, well, you know, people are doing these things to me and they're all helpless. So just notice what, and you know, when you're being objective too, what part are they playing? That's a really great place of power to come from, noticing where they're coming from. And also, just to make sure that you're not part of this drama triangle, are you coming across when they're blaming as the rescuer who's going to come and save the day, etc.? Or are you a victim to their behaviour? And that's a really important thing to notice, because remember, we dance around. This is a model also of relationship, so we can get caught up in this triangle as a first response. And remember, a first response doesn't mean that you're stuck in that response to, say, the blamer or the hero who comes across with all the information. That you can take a breath and get present, get above that line to be in a place of presence. So let's think about when we're present and we're not in the drama triangle. We've already named where they're at. We've probably noticed where we're at. We've taken a breath and we're going above that line, that drama line. And here is just an image from research, Napper and Newton, year 2000. You can recognize this image that was on the slide before. I've taken it from the same research. So up on the top left is where the villain was, and it's in the video that I provided, drama triangle versus presence. They've named this part the challenger, the part that's above the presence line. And what they've stated that you need to be the challenger, you need to be very proactive. So it's about valuing other people, because remember, the villain blames other people. So what you do when you're above the line is you value other people, but you also are really great at having boundaries. It's saying objectively, no, this is the line in the sand, and you have to be really clear and objective about that line in the sand. Okay, again, being a leader, we're shifting from being the rescuer or the hero to the coach. And what the coach does is responsible. They're responsible for following through. They're also responsible for trying to get the other person to think for themselves. but you're also not trying to do too much. You're not trying to hero the other person and do it all for them. You've got limits around what you would do. And let's think about the bottom one, which is being victim. And in the video, they call it going from victim to creator. And when you're going from victim to creator, you need to be voicing and owning your own feelings, thoughts, reactions, and vulnerability, and making that okay. So let's just have a look at some names of nurse bully archetypes. And this was actually quite a common list when I was looking. Bullying is actually quite a big thing in nursing, as you would probably know. And we know bullying upwards, which you would probably have experienced with some of your staff, is also very real. So you can read through those lists, and sometimes why, by pausing, and sometimes why I like to have a list is because you can point towards something. Oh, that's what that is, and it gives you a little bit of understanding and a little bit of clarity about what you're dealing with. I actually don't think this list is exhaustive, but I think it's also just interesting. So pause if you want to have a read of that. Okay, so when somebody is behaving in a particular way, they're coming to you with and they're disgruntled, what can be really good is get very objective about what you hear and what you see. So for example, and why you would do that is because we want you to get into that objective frame of mind. Firstly, so you can deal with it more effectively when you're really being really objectively listening or even considering their behaviours. But it's also good for when you're recounting it to somebody else. It's like you're very clear, you're not subjective about what they're saying or what they're doing. So you can be really clear if this behaviour is or isn't okay. And how we name things objectively is the behaviours. We think about what can you see through a window. If you're looking through a window, what would you notice them doing? And thinking about what they're saying, if you had a tape recorder there, what would you hear them saying? Or even their voice, what would you hear their voice doing? And this can be a really great start when you're dealing with difficult people, is start to think of listing their behaviours objectively. The next thing is we're starting to think now about the qualities of these people. Now, generally, they don't want a solution. They just want to find fault. Remember, they're just staying in that persecutor, blamey, villain mode. But if we think about where chronic complainers can run rampant is when there's not performance standards clearly defined. And I think certainly if HR doesn't have your back, that can also be where they can run rampant. Where the values aren't part of the culture and then explicitly discussed, or if managers are operating in a distance or avoid confrontation. So behaviours just can keep going. So the first thing to do is to start with, we've already talked about, which is listing their behaviours, so getting into that objective mode when you're listening to them. And the second thing is just listening for understanding. So first is objectivity and the second is listening for understanding. So we often know that just by just listening to people can reduce their stress response and makes them feel heard, which sometimes isn't the case for some workers. And I think you can sort of weed out the chronic complainers from those who have a real issue is with listening. If they just calm down from you validating them and giving them some time and making them feel heard, you probably know that you haven't got a chronic problem. Now, this is also where the research differs. Some people say do not give these people airtime, but I would say do it in the first instance, listen, and then after that you would try to reduce their airtime. We'll talk about that shortly. You've probably all heard the story of the lion with the thorn in its paw. You know that if you remove the thorn, remove the issue, the lion will be your friend. So unfortunately, with some people, this is not the case, and win-win is just going to have to go out the window. That no matter what you do, nothing is going to make them happy, and I think you probably already know that. Some of these people that you may be dealing with generally have a pattern of mistreating others to get what they want. They actually don't want to cooperate. They want to control and they want to win. They don't want to play by the rules. They want to make their own rules up. And so to know if you're dealing with one of these people, just ask yourself, do you walk on eggshells around them? And if so, you may be dealing with a donkey if you've listened to the fable. We often think that if we do leadership training, we're going to learn about how to deal with everybody. But the thing is, some people just want to control and manipulate you, and there's nothing that you can do about it. You actually can't change them. But what you can do is change perhaps or about how you respond to them. And so these are just a couple of ideas. So number one is if they're trying to control or manipulate you, please stand up if they're standing up. We don't want you, or we don't want them standing over you. And this is one of those points where there's a little bit of a conflict. Is some people or some researchers say that you try to build rapport and connect with people, and some others say please don't bring yourself into the discussion. They actually don't care why something didn't happen, and they don't really care about you. They will only use any information that you give them as fodder. And certainly if you're dealing with somebody who's got a personality disorder, don't tell them anything personal about you or about, if you're angry or anything like that. I mean, sure, you can apologize, but don't bring yourself too much into the conversation. And I think you can just trust yourself if you do need to bring some rapport to the situation, or if you're dealing with somebody who you should have like an emotional distance from. So if you complain, don't explain. This is a great thing from Sam Horn. She's actually got some really great stuff around this. The first thing I've added is active listen. She's just got a 3-step process. I added the active listen first. The second thing she says is just simply apologize rather than going on and listening to the story over and over again. Just, yep, sorry that happened to you. Yep, you're right, tea breaks are really important. And then stick with an action, leave it with me, I'll see what can be done. Just keeping things short, sharp and shiny is really important. You don't want to give them a platform to get on their high horse and talk too much. And this is what the next statement says, get them off their bully pulpit. So you don't want to give them a huge forum for moaning. You don't want also to let them take their rage out on you. What often can happen if they're raging at you, you can see this girl doing a T sign, which is a timeout sign. Often if somebody's raging at you, they cannot listen. So just doing the T with your hands is a really great option. Another thing to do is to say very unemotionally, let's not do this. We could talk all day about why this shouldn't have happened or who's to blame, but that won't change anything. Let's spend our time looking at a solution. So practice saying this, get really good at cutting the conversation up, so they're not going on and on and on, and keep trying to move the conversation forward rather than bog down in moaning. So that should be your goal. Keep saying, yep, let's look for a solution rather than just making a forum for moaning. Okay, so feel free to pause. I've just taken this from Managing a Chronic Complainer, and at the end of this training, I've got all the resources that I've used to create this training. So you can just stop and have a little read of this now. Okay, so just a little summary what to avoid when you're dealing with chronic complainers is attempting to win them over by selling them your ideas or trying to get them on your side often doesn't work. Remember, they don't want win-win. But also I really want to get across to you that ignoring the issue, and the issue is this person, and not doing something about the complaints or the person who's doing the complaint is a mistake. And I think you probably know this from your experience anyway. Really getting to know the facts of what they're complaining about. Again, that objective list of how they're behaving is really good. Being really clear, if you have to have these lines in the sand with the person about how they're behaving, like shifting the conversation from sometimes, and it has to happen, from what they're complaining about to their behavior, it can be a really useful thing. And especially if you're being really explicit about the behaviors that aren't and are okay, be very consistent if you can. And especially, I mean, if there's some rules or some procedures that need to happen, just speak to them. There doesn't have to be any arguments about these rules, especially with the COVID vax and all that sort of business. It's pretty clear. You don't need to have an argument about it. As a leader, you don't have to defend yourself. I want you to really think about emotionally disengaging from these people. You can say, if you want to cut them off, I will look into that, or what's the real problem here. If they're trying to pull you in, again, don't talk about your emotions and say, if they're saying that you're angry or you're emotional or whatever, you don't need to speak about you. Shift it back to them, or ask them, by what do you mean? Always trying to move the conversation forward, not having you in the conversation, sticking to the facts and sticking to what's happening around. And if you do have to talk about you, just talk about you in objective words and objective behaviors. And also don't feel bad if you think you're both getting a bit angry, and especially if they're angry. You have a right to say, no, this conversation needs to stop, and let's talk about it when we're calmer. And we're going to practice this in our feedback conversations too. Okay, I love these quotes, especially if you're starting to feel bad, and I've certainly felt bad and work with a lot of managers who take it really personally when they're getting attacked by other people. But remember, nobody else can make you inferior without your consent. And I like to say, don't give a bully a ride home in your car or hop into your bed. I know that sounds really crazy, but you don't want to keep thinking about this at home. Don't bring them home with you. Leave them in your office. Leave the issue in your office. And please don't think about them when you're in bed. If you do have to talk about it at home with somebody, please just give yourself a 5 or 10 minute window where you need to talk about it. Because you just don't want to bring all this stuff home. You need to feel fresh when you're working with people like this. Oh, I don't even know what that next statement is. I obviously haven't finished that. But the main thing is, don't personalize. Their reaction probably doesn't have anything to do or your leadership style. Okay, what we accept, we teach. So really get to know the code of conduct. Again, knowing that as objective behaviors. Get support to deal with person. Please don't go it alone. You can't deal with somebody like this on your own. Pick your battles. Not every situation needs a confrontation. What else we have to say about this? Often you can start to have a culture in the workplace. If you've got a problem, you also need to come with solutions. And that's easy enough to start talking about in meetings or putting signs up around the place, encouraging that sort of thing. So in the end, and I've often had big discussions with people about this, are people who are chronic complainers an asset or a liability. And you have to get pretty clear about that. It can be like a simple maths equation. You can't make this decision on your own, and you really need to know when you are ready to escalate it, especially if they're a big liability. And we know that these people can spread contagion like nobody's business. All right, so fortunately, most people aren't like those that we've had to talk about today. Probably 97% of people are pretty reasonable and respond well to active listening and a win-win type of scenario. Please check in with somebody else to get clearer with the type of person that you're dealing with. I think Google can be your friend. Don't be scared about Googling this sort of person. You might be dealing with a narcissist. You might be dealing with somebody who is a psychopath, and we're talking about personality disorders here. You may be dealing with somebody who has oppositional disorder. And so what I'd really love to say is good luck with this. It's not an easy road, but it's something that every leader has to tackle. I hope what you got from this very brief outline is that there is no one right answer, but there are a few key things you can do to not give these people airtime, and they'll get to know how you like to deal with things, and they'll get to know that you're not going to give them too much time of day with their complaints. So here we go. I've listed the references with the links. Oh, the other one I haven't put on there is the drama triangle, but just get in contact with me if you want to talk a little bit more about that.